that we have actually done quite a bit with over the last couple of years.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we designed some scenarios for GaryCon 2025.
Was it 2025 or 2024?
That was 2025. No, it was 2024. You're right, 2024.
2024.
So yeah, I ran those at GaryCon, and you ran some online as well.
Yes, I did. Yep.
Yeah.
I
Um,
ran. See, it was 8 games, I believe, in 2024. And then we ran when we were going over The Witcher first time. Um, when we were first introduced to it, I ran that same game, the one shot, on stream. So yeah, we got a bit of experience with The Witcher.
yes. Well, and Witcher is actually, not just a fantastic story and the TV series that's out there, but the TTRPG is actually really good. It's well put together. It's a fun game. So with that, let's hello to the audience. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're definitely glad to have you here. And we're starting tonight with our three-part of The Witcher. And The Witcher is definitely something we're going to see more of on the channel. It's a game that we've enjoyed for quite a long time. And behold, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to wow and amaze you. All
Hey,
right.
welcome in Infinity Course. Good to see you, bud. Um, but yeah, let's jump right into it. Um, and yes, this is Witcher universe based off of. Initially, it was based off a book um, series by Andrzej Sapkowski. If I'm mispronouncing your name, Andre, I apologize. Polish. Shout out to Poland for producing this amazing author and for him producing this fantastic world, which was then turned into a series of video games
Yep.
um, by Project Red (CDPR),
Yep.
and then turned into a TV show um, from Netflix. Currently, and they have 3 seasons out. I think there's a fourth season coming out. I think, and then they have another spin-off show. But a massive universe that's been produced in multiple mediums. Um, and now it's a TTRPG
And
by Art Talsorian.
so not not, I may have some of the exact details screwed up with this, but that's all right. You know that this TTRPG, The Witcher, actually owes its existence as an R. Talsorian game to Cyberpunk.
Yeah,
Yes.
yep.
So when
And what Greg's meaning by that is a lot of the well, not a lot, but you see echoes of, and I can't remember for the life of me call their system. But cyber, you see a lot of Red's systems in Witcher TTRPG, which is not a
well,
bad thing.
actually, yes, you do it, and a lot of it is based off of the system, that same system. But the actual existence of this system. So when CD Projekt Red approached Mike Pondsmith about creating the Cyberpunk game, um, they also approached him and Cody about the potential for making The Witcher into a TTRPG. So that all happened together. So once they signed a contract for Cyberpunk, they then took on, and actually Cody took on the project of writing this TTRPG, obviously with Mike and Lisa and the team. But yeah, that is actually how that happened.
Nice.
So
I That piece I didn't know.
yeah, it does
That piece I
potentially
did
owe
not
its
know.
existence to, if they wouldn't have done Cyberpunk 2077, who knows if this would have been in our Talsorian game. I don't know. Maybe.
Who knows? I mean, I honestly, the fact that it was a it was such a popular IP, I think enough people wanted to play in the Witcher universe. Because
Right.
I mean, I was hearing talks of, oh, let's bring this to D&D, like fifth edition and other systems like that, like the and I can't remember for the life of me what the dice system for Vampire the Masquerade is in that world. But that system, I think it's called like White Wolf system or something like that.
Yeah, White Wolf Games is a designer there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like they're talking, bringing it there. So it was going to be picked up by somebody, but lo and behold, and I think to everyone's good fortune, it was picked up by Art House Story and put together because they did a fantastic job. And my hats off to Cody for his work there. 'Cause I believe he was the principal designer on that one.
Yeah, he did a lot of writing for this. That and the rest of the art. I don't want to take anything away from anybody, but yeah, he was
Yeah,
kind of the lead for the project. Absolutely. And this was a huge step out for Cody for sure, and then led to the project that he just came out with Shadowscar as well. So.
which we had the good fortune of playtesting. That was a good time.
Hmm.
I was definitely enjoy. It was a good romp through an interesting world, and it's a very modular world. But well, that's
We'll
another
cover
deep
that.
dive
We'll
for
cover
another
that
time.
another time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's another deep dive for another time. We're here to talk about The Witcher. Um, all right, yeah, let's get right down to
So,
it. The
so the
world.
so the Witcher, obviously has its own world, completely different from any other world that's out there, and the lore behind it is very specific about nobody knows how this world came into being. So it literally
Yep.
just kind of come from nowhere. Um, but it's very interesting. It has a lot of the same types of creatures and characters from myth and lore of other games as well. So, and it's not a lighthearted game. It could be if that's how you wanted to play it. I mean, you have that option, but the game itself is well, it's adult fantasy. Happy endings are not necessarily built into this game. Can happen, but they're rare. And with the system, actions have consequences, which for me is a huge piece to it. I like systems where your actions have consequences. Go ahead, man.
Uh,
You're dying to
Absolutely.
talk, so you go for it.
No, no, I'm just saying, absolutely. It like, you bring up a really important piece there that it a lot of the monsters and myths within the Witcher universe are definitely correlate back to real myths and things like that. With regards to the creation of Witcher universe, yeah, no one basically. What I'm remembering of the video games and the book, basically, it was a conjunction of worlds and some magical storm happened that basically kind of thinned the veil, so to speak, between a bunch of worlds, and monsters got let in to what's called the continent. It doesn't have a name; they just call it the continent.
Hmm.
And if it does have a name, then it's recent. But for the longest time, it was just called the continent. And again, yeah, monsters and things that straight out of legend started populating, crossing over essentially, and humanity didn't have a way to combat that. They didn't know what the hell to do, so Witchers came about. And like any tool, they were used and then discarded. But we're gonna get to all that as the episode progresses. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of that's that. But
So you have such a large, wide variety of different creatures in here. You really, if you've watched the shows at all, I mean, it's all here. And that adventure piece to it is it's easy to create adventures in this system. It really is. It's not difficult at all. Um, I think what we focused on primarily for the adventures that we created last year were mainly like werewolves, right?
yes, yeah, that was the one that I put together, was kind of a werewolf mystery essentially. There was a town that was kind of going through some stuff, and werewolves were involved. Just you just kind of had to put the clues together. And the good thing is, what I like about um, the game and the world is every everyone has a role to play in like from a game perspective, but in the world, everyone has a role to play. You know, everybody from the baker to the guardsman. You know, you can kind of step into that and craft your own story within the world of The Witcher. And like you said, Greg, there's tons of different races. I mean, obviously you have the elves, the dwarves,
Hmm.
and humans, and then Witchers. I'm pretty sure are like their own thing,
Yeah,
which is cool.
Witchers are their own thing entirely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Um,
mean, Witchers are more of a construct. I mean, because they were probably human,
mhm.
and they were made specifically to fight monsters.
Yep.
So that's the whole mystique behind them, the magic and everything else. They were bred and made specifically to fight the monsters of the world, not to be fearful and to be the saviors of humanity, essentially.
And the thing, the setting of the TTRPG is interesting because yeah, you have the Witchers and you have the monsters and all that, but you can create an entire game based off of never having seen a single monster, single Witcher the entire time. Because the setting itself starts with um, that conflict between the Empire of Nilfgaard and like the Northern Kingdoms and Skellig. So there's already a conflict, right, kind of going on in the setting before you even add in like the titular Witcher characters and monsters that they face. And that's not to say that you can't face those monsters as like a human or an elf, a dwarf, or like or outside of those kingdoms that I just named. It's not like you can't face them. It's just you don't have to. Um, people always, like when I guess people found out about the Witcher game, they're like, would it be weird to have a game called The Witcher without the Witcher in it? Like without a Witcher in it? I'm like, no, not really. When you read deeper into the lore that's being
Right,
presented to you, no, there's drastically less Witchers than there are of everything else.
right.
Um, you know,
Witchers at this point are actually somewhat rare. I mean,
yes,
it's
they're
not. It's
rare. They're dying out. Um, because they're hard to make. um, and that's again, we'll get into that as we go on with the episode because that is part of kind of the lore of the world. But yeah, let me just go through some pieces here. Yep. So you have the Empire of Nilfgaard, the Northern Kingdoms, and then Skellig, which, if memory serves, I believe Skellig are like the countries or the country with that pertains to like the elves and dwarves. Which that in and of itself is interesting to me because it takes the typical fantasy trope and turns it on its head. Because typically, you look at D&D, you look at a lot of these other fantasy games, elves and dwarves are typically held in similar regard, or usually in the elves' case, higher regard than humans.
right.
But here, they're looked at sideways, like they're like a second and third class citizen, more or less, because the predominant race, most of the kingdoms are human. So it's interesting. I kind of like it.
Right.
Um,
There's a whole piece in the lore about that though, because it's humans. The human population is the dominant population, so humans in this world reign supreme. However, um, if you really look at the other races, I mean, they're very similar to what you'd expect to see from like a Dungeons and Dragons or many of the other fantasy style role playing games. The majestic elves, once very proud people, the dwarves, all of those types of races, they're still something special. There's just not as many of them. Is really what it comes down to.
they've been kind of their people have been reduced. The humans, and I know, and the ironic part is this is something that we typically see of if you look at the lore, in a lot of books, a lot of games. It typically depicts humans as just gonna not to be crass, but like we breed quickly. We're like rabbits. Like we have just kids, tons and tons of kids, and it, all these magical races or these kind of non-human races are typically slow to have children. A lot of the times they're long lived, so live longer, stuff like that.
Right.
And that's it's kind of the same thing here, where humans, again, because of that conjunction of worlds, humans are native. I think the only in lore, the only native race were the dwarves, actually, at one point. If memory serves, I believe so. It's either dwarves and the elves, or just the dwarves. But a lot like humans are native. The monsters aren't native to this particular world. I don't know. Again, the kingdom sits on what's called the continent. I can't remember if the world has a name or not. But a lot of species have come to this world, aren't native. Humans were one of them, and then they basically pushed out everything else, kind of taken over. So again, it kind of takes that typical trope of elves being kind of the dominant species for various reasons, and it turns that on its head where now if you're not human, well, you're shit. I mean,
Hmm.
you see it in the show for sure. They definitely showcase that.
But
Um,
I mean, it's because there's so many of them. I mean, that's really, are they, you know, dominant by numbers is one thing.
yeah,
And that's a lot of what you see in The Witcher. Here's the question about it though. When you look at, okay, the psychology, and we'll get to the game here in just a moment. Just really talking through some of this stuff is neat because there's a lot of ideas there. But when you look at this world, are you really living in a world of monsters when you are the biggest monster of them all?
that's a good question. And my answer to that is no, because we've seen it in a lot of fiction where there is humans and other species, be they elves, dwarves, or everything in between. Um, it can often and sometimes you see or humans are sometimes the worst monsters. You know,
There you go.
sometimes they're the worst monsters because like,
All the
well, uh, again, like you said, dominance by numbers. It's you're not stronger than these other guys. There's just more of you.
like I think kind of like Geralt says, and that is, it's just like people to invent monsters and monstrosities because then they seem less monstrous themselves.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, and that is one thing you see in the books, you see in the show, where the character of Geralt, who, if you know anything about The Witcher, you know who he is. He points out the hypocrisy and kind of the irony in that, where humans, call elves or dwarves monsters or weird, um, and again, you have the I guess actual monsters out there, but it's like you're not far off from them. And this is
right,
coming from an individual who hunts literal monsters for a living. All
right.
this his whole sole purpose, and he can look at humans and be like, "You're sometimes worse than what I face out there." You have so there's
I
definitely a
guess
psychological and a sociological aspect to it that's really interesting. That um, I'm glad that Andrzej Sapkowski embraces and has kind of put out there
Right.
for the world to see.
Well, it
Um,
definitely created a different take on fantasy realms.
mm,
A lot of I just it's unique enough that it sets itself apart from all of the other fantasy realms that are out there. I think there's a few that are really unique in and of themselves. Obviously, Dungeons and Dragons as the
yep,
biggest one, but then you have games like Symborum and The Witcher and Dragon's Bane, some of those games that actually stand alone as well. So let's talk a little bit about the game itself and how things work. So with The Witcher TTRPG, you only need two types of dice. So
Yep.
you'll need 10-sided dice and you'll need 6-sided dice to play the game. That's basically it. So again, very similar to Cyberpunk in that regard. What's next?
So you say, yep. So you'll only need the 10 and 6-sided dice, which again, which is good. I've since playing, Artausurian's games, I personally like the fact that I don't have to have a ton of dice with my games. Um, so that's all you'll need, and 'cause we're saving stuff for the next episode. Um, where do we want to jump into
Well,
next?
jump. I mean, we talked a little bit about the origins and the races. So, what about the Witchers and the monsters themselves?
Oh, all right. Let's jump over to the Witchers. All right. So here's what they say about Witchers. Let's see. Well, it says right here, current Witchers. 200 or so years ago, Witchers were common. So, like what we were saying earlier, back when the conjunction happened, Witchers were a common thing, um, more so than now. And unfortunately, they were essentially too good at the job. So they started killing way more monsters than there was a need for them. So there was really no call to make more. And being a Witcher is a very dangerous profession. So a lot of them typically ended up dead at some point. And it was usually, I'm not gonna say usually, it was equal parts because of the monsters they hunted or the people that they hunted that monster for. Because elves and dwarves are not the only second class citizen in this world. Witchers, honestly, probably more so um, than either of those two races are viewed as second class citizens because and here's the thing for me I think it's because they were once human.
Okay,
They were once human, and so when people see them, and realize, well, that could be me. That's what there's a potential for me to be that, obviously given the right circumstances. But it's like kind of look in a mirror a little bit and not liking what you're seeing, you know. And maybe it's an understanding that we created that. We took
absolutely.
it, and typically, and again, it's orphans, it's people, just children who's lost their families who have too many children. They just end up out on the street and they get picked up by traveling witchers typically, or taken to the witcher camps and schools. There's different schools, and we'll talk about
Well,
that in a minute.
would have been taken. Yeah,
Yeah, would have been taken to the Witcher schools and turned over. And then they go through a bunch of trials. Most of them actually end up dying. Again, that's another thing. Most of them end up dying because of this trial.
and he froze. All right, hold on a minute.
Um,
Okay, so we'll give that a minute to catch up, and so rather than go on and on with the Witchers, because there is a loose story behind the Witchers. So kind of the far back lore piece is the Witcher story, which Rob was just talking about a little bit ago. When you start to come up to where the real lore of the game starts is around the area of what is called the First and Second Northern Wars. Now, most of your male characters, 24 or so or above, potentially would have fought in those wars. Um, if your character's older than that, then you may have come from what's called the Nilfgaardian provinces. Um, so let's just talk a little bit about some of this lore piece, like the Nilfgaardian Wars. What do you know about the Nilfgaardian Wars, Rob?
am I back?
Yep, you are back.
Okay, cool. You know what, Greg? Answer to your question, not as much as I probably should. So go ahead and enlighten me.
Well, it's essentially the Northern Wars. The Nilfgaardian
Hmm.
Wars are called the Northern Wars. There were two of them, and they are a big part of what laid out the structure or the 16 countries that are formed here on the continent. That's where the bulk of the history of this world comes from, is those two wars. As far as getting right into the details to it, the book itself actually lays out a pretty in-depth history on what happened for you. So it gives you an idea of what countries were fighting what countries, what happened to the individual races, and it also gives you a little bit about what happened to the Witchers, because the Witchers, the program that was created with the Witchers, which are mutants, by the way, um, actually worked so well that one could say that human beings ran low on monsters, so they had to start killing each other.
I mean, let's be honest, it wouldn't have taken much for them to do that.
Right, right.
They were going to do that regardless. The monsters just gave them something to kind of to poke at. But yeah, no. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. It because that actually is showcased also in TV show. I remember.
But
Um,
there's a ton of history in the Witcher game itself. So I mean, it
yeah.
actually kind of expands because it takes everything from the books, from the games, from the series, and kind of puts it together. So in a way, it kind of expands the world more. So
And actually, there is something that and again, if you've seen the show, you might know what I'm talking about. But and this is actually new to me. I didn't know this was a thing. Like a pretty big thing. But across all the Witcher schools, and there are a couple of there's a School of the Wolf, which Geralt is from. School of the Snake, Manticore. There's a couple of them. But the law of surprise or law of surprises is something that is carried across all schools. And basically, what it boils down to is like the show. If if I'm someone who hires a witcher to save me or save my kid or do a job for me, and ask them how can I repay you, a witcher can basically say, hey, you will grant me whatever unexpected thing you encounter when you return home. Um, and be that a child, a windfall of money, it was interesting to find out that that's not just something that happened kind of in the show or was unique to Geralt, but it's something that is tied to the Witcher culture. Um, which I don't know. Why do you think they do that, Geralt? I was about to call you Geralt.
Geralt,
You don't have enough hair.
I'm just an
Why do
older
you think
version.
that? Yeah, just over it, retired. Why do you think they do that, Greg? Like, why do you think that was kind of a piece that was brought in?
Well,
I'm gonna have to go back and read the books.
here's the thing with this. So when it comes to the game itself, yeah. So, but here's the thing with that. You don't have to follow that necessarily that timeline. You can
Mm,
create your game anywhere in there, and the game is designed to accommodate that wherever you want to play in that timeline.
yep.
Um, there's actually a rather large GM's guide as part of this book. So it doesn't focus a huge amount on the players, other than the lore and the character creation piece. All the basic mechanics that the player needs to be able to play in this world. But the
Mm,
back end piece to this book for the GM is pretty expansive. So it really helps you, like if you're new to the game or honestly even new to GMing period. I mean, this is a fairly decent game to start with because it does give you a lot of detail in there as to how to run a game, how the mechanics work, and how to form parties, how to form a particular scenario if you are creating a campaign for your characters. There are also supplemental books designed to go with the core rule book, that give you a lot of examples of the empires, the different races, and a lot of gaming, a lot of campaign ideas. So that's a big piece about that. It's not not truly an answer to the question that you asked me, Rob, but it really, when it comes to this game, I think it's important to understand just that, Assassin of Kings is kind of the timeline of where the game was designed to be, but it has all the lore in it. So you can literally start wherever you want to. Now, page 233 of the book actually has uh, like the video game list, the effects of the timeline in the video games in the Dungeon Masters section. For this be page 232,
Yeah.
which allows you to really kind of expand things into the movie series versus just the video games or the core story. All right, so yeah, there's
Yeah.
actually, if you're
Just
looking, like pages 10 through 12 kind of give you The Witcher 1, Witcher 2, and Witcher 3, and how those fit together. So if you're really trying to pick a spot to land, where do I really want my characters to play? Um,
mhm.
you can do that. You can kind of plug your characters into a particular area of the storyline of The Witcher, or you
Yeah.
can just use the world overall and just go for it.
With my particular one shot that I did, just kind of took I picked a country, plopped a mining town there, and then crafted a story. That was it. That's all she wrote. Anyway, it was actually pretty well received.
It
It was it.
was actually, people had a lot of fun with it, and it's again, it's an easy system to have a lot of fun with. It really is. Um, it doesn't have as much of for those who are familiar with. Okay, let's just take a juxtapose for a moment and look at. Okay, you have D&D, which is not skills heavy game. It's more rules heavy game. Then you have Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk is designed to be more of a skills heavy game. More, I wouldn't call it rules light, but it's rules lighter than like Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm,
Um, this is kind of in between because you do have the skills piece. You have the same basic characteristics that you'd have in Cyberpunk. So you have intelligence, reflex, dex, body, speed, empathy, charisma, will, and luck, and they work
mhm.
very much the same. But then you have extended skills, and those skills are, in large part, a lot of them depend on what those base attributes are that determines what
Yes.
those skills are, like your stun ability, your run, leap, stamina, things like that.
Yep.
Um,
Brawling and kind of melee and
right,
stuff
right.
like that.
And those extended skills also are used to control, I believe, almost completely the magic system. So,
Yes, certain attributes, yes, will do lean into, um,
yeah.
yeah, it's will that kind of leans into your magic piece there, which, that's one other thing that I like. Magic is not as ever present as you see in a lot of systems. Magic is very much a very few people can do it, can use it, and it has a cost. It's not just
Right.
I'm gonna expend a spell slot and hey, no big deal. And again, that's not a knock at D&D system. That system is that system.
Right.
But I for one, I do enjoy when something like casting a fireball, something large and grandiose like that. It comes with a cost. It comes with there's a very physical um, cost to it that you can injure yourself.
It definitely, this system reminds me of a magic. Okay, so a mechanical system called the Will and the Way, which
Heard of
was
that one.
Well, it was a replacement for, it wasn't necessarily designed specifically as a replacement, but it definitely worked as a replacement for like the component system from Dungeons and Dragons. So you didn't have to worry about all the, I need a red dragon's eye and, tail of a newt and all this other stuff. You didn't have to worry about
Mm.
that stuff. The things that nobody really like, well, no, I shouldn't say nobody, shouldn't say that.
Some
Most
people
people
do.
don't like trying to keep track of all that stuff. So, it just bogs you
True.
down. And it's this system, you don't have to worry about that. You're not keeping track of that stuff. It's all based off of that. I call it the will and a way.
Yeah.
Um, so, just in case you are interested. So, who is your favorite character? I'm probably don't even have to ask your favorite character in the Witcher series.
In the Witcher series,
I want to say the video game because
I mean, playing as Geralt, so it's got to be Geralt. I mean, yes, I do like Geralt. He is one of my favorites, but I think my favorite is well, three. It's Geralt, in no particular. It's Geralt. It's Jaskier or Dandelion, as he's called in the game, and Vesemir actually, who is Geralt's mentor, and kind of the mentor for the Witchers of the School of the. And I like them for different reasons. Obviously, I like Geralt for the fact that it's not that he's the character you play in the game, but more so that he has a very human aspect to him. He is no longer human.
right.
Um, he's no longer human, but he genuinely wants to help, like not just humanity, but everybody. He genuinely wants to help people, even though he has every reason not to. Every reason not to.
So,
But and then and Vesemir for kind of the same reason. If you look at Vesemir's, because there was actually an animated show on Netflix as well that showcases Vesemir as a young Witcher. You get to find out a bit more about him and kind of why he is the way he is. And those two characters, really all the Witchers, but those two specifically, you get to see the humanity of those individuals that the lore and the world try to make you think has been stripped from them. So it's interesting, and then again, they have every reason not to want to help humanity, especially. Um, and then when you see aspects of the monsters that they hunt, in some cases, those monsters just want to be left alone. They don't want to hurt
right.
nobody. They just want to be left alone. So it's just you see more human aspects from the monsters and the mutants than you do humans. And then for Jaskier's character, he portrays that and brings that out in a very authentic way. He doesn't try to sugarcoat shit. He doesn't, at least in my opinion, he doesn't. He tells Geralt's story as it is. I mean, he puts on a little flair, but tries to be true to his friend. So yeah, those are my favorite characters. What
Okay.
about yours?
I'm okay. I'm Gerald. Gerald's. I don't have a big, long, lengthy explanation of characters to go through. That was my favorite character.
That's fair. Well, to be fair, I've also played the games and read the book, so I think I have a bit of a deeper understanding. Um,
Probably.
which, by the way, for anybody who's watching or will watch in the future, definitely go read the books, play the video games. They are a storytelling experience all their own. Besides obviously playing the TTRPG and making your own story.
Absolutely. So some of the characters that are included in the books, Geralt is one of them.
Yep.
So they include these characters so that you have the real feel for the world. You can actually encounter Geralt. You can encounter Yennefer of Vingerberg. Um, Dandelion is in here. Zoltan is in here. Triss.
Just
I might have to
Marigold. Yep.
change. I might have to change. Maybe Triss might have been more of my favorite, but
Yep.
um, Vernon's in here. You had Irvith that's in here. You know, there's a bunch of the main characters from the storyline and from the video games that are in the book. Full stats, backstory, whole deal. So you know, you might learn something about some of these guys. Um, it is very interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. One of the other things, and this is kind of moving on to a new system here, crafting. And I know you love this, Greg, because you are a crafter at heart. But
I do love it.
unlike a lot of games, and I think I'm gonna pick on D&D a little bit here. D&D does have a crafting system. Obviously, it's kind of a loose-ish crafting system. There are some
Right,
tables and that you can use, but here in the Witcher universe, like they take that to like there is a dedicated crafting system that they have that you can use. Hell, I'm fairly sure there's a crafting class. We will not be going into that in this episode. In class review on the next episode. So that's the only time I will mention classes. Um, but there's a whole crafting system here that that you can take advantage of. You can make a character, and hell, there's a whole story behind. I mean, everything from butcher weapons to I guess normal weapons, different crafted materials. Um, and in this regard, this is where I feel Cody's gamer, because I would bet money that that guy plays video games, where that has come out, because it's very much reminiscent of a video. And that's not a critique. I think more TTRPGs could utilize a system like this, to varying degrees for their games.
right, right.
Because I mean, you can make whole stories behind gathering the material components for something you want to craft. You can uh, or hunt down monsters that potentially can produce or have or are made up of the materials that you need. Off the top of my head, I know one third-party D&D um, uh, module that has come out. I'm going to give a shout out to Ryoko's Guide to the Yokai Realms that was put together kind of with that crafting focus in mind. Um, so, what do you have to say on the crafting system, Greg?
Not much. You know how it goes for me. I enjoy the economics of a game and, you
Mhm.
know, and the crafting piece to it, obviously. Um, I get more into the story side of the games. So that's, you know what I mean? It's not, for me, I'm not a gamer for say. It's not about winning the game. It's about telling a good story.
That is
Um,
true.
and, you know, sometimes the crafting piece can really add into that, especially if you have a well-developed crafting system that actually puts a little time and thought and makes you look at it more on a tactical level rather than, hey, I
Mhm.
want this, how much gold do I have to pay for it or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
it really gives depth to that because I like that you kind of pointed that out. I get that feeling as well where it's okay. I'm just gonna throw gold at it, kind of deal. Where
mm,
it's like, no, you got to go. You know, either you're gonna spend a ton of gold, or you go and get the stuff and you craft it yourself.
right, exactly. So there are a couple of aspects of this game that I do want to touch on really quick. I'm not going to go. I don't want to go into detail because we'll cover all of this when we do the character creation piece to this. But number one is the social standing, which we kind of
Mm.
talked about a little bit already with the dwarves and the elves. Witchers and mages. So there's an oddity here in the fact that mages are both a potential player character and a monster at the same time. Um,
Mm.
but there are there basically are five territories on the continent. So you have the north, you have Nelfgard, you have Skellig, you have Delblathian, Delblathiana, I think is how that's pronounced anyway. and then
I
you
believe so. Yes.
and then you have Mahakam. Now, humans are considered, the dominant species. They're equal basically in the north, Nilfgaard and Skillion, which tells you that those are predominantly human territories. Now, the north has a little different look on like dwarves. Dwarves are tolerated there, but not necessarily an equal or totally accepted. Witchers are hated and feared in the north, and mages are also hated and feared in the north. So it's a dynamic that when you are playing this game, you kind of have to add that piece in there for what their social standing is and where the campaign or where the game takes them. Because if you're playing one of these characters, whether you're playing an elf or you're playing a witcher or you're playing whatever, you definitely have to look at that. You have to look at, okay, what is the the political standing of my people in this area? Are we hated? Are we tolerated? Are we considered okay? Or are we both hated and feared?
Yeah, yep. That's something that it can really add that much more depth to a campaign or a portion of your campaign where you're taking, say we'll say, dwarves and if you have a party of mostly dwarves and elves, but you're taking them to northern, northern kingdoms or even Helton. Well, no, Nilfgaard is an interesting beast. Um, but yeah, you taking them to some of these countries and kingdoms, and like we were saying earlier, they're second class citizens. How are they going to get treated by, like, if they're trying to look for work? How are they going to get treated by potential employers, the populace? Are they're going to be given shelter, food, things like that, that all play a part in character development and the story, and how a party could potentially react to those kind of things.
Right.
It also means that your characters can actually have a legitimate impact on how they're viewed by a particular town, depending on how well known they are, town, a city, even a kingdom, if they do something big and wild, but both for good or ill, they outlaws. Um, so it's
Right.
it's definitely, again, it adds depth and adds a world to the world.
Yeah, well,
What
let's
else?
see. I want to, there's the character creation piece, which is very expansive, and we will go through that next week. I don't want to go too much into that, spoil the surprise basically, because you're gonna love it. You will love the character creation. If you like cyberpunk at all, you will love this system for character creation. Um, I don't want to do that. You got, okay, so we went, yeah, all the character options. There's a lot of them. So let's talk about the statistics really quick and what those actually do. So starting on page 48 of the core rule book, it starts to go through what your stats are and kind of explains them for you. So as I mentioned before, you have intelligence, reflex, dexterity, body, speed, empathy. Then you have it's not a charisma, it's called craft. I said that wrong.
Mm,
And then you have will and luck. So intelligence obviously is for solving puzzles, performing science, deduction, and the like. Reflex for fighting, dodging, tasks that require fast reactions and accurate movements. Then you have dexterity for ranged attacks. Anything that requires hand-eye coordination or balance would be covered under dexterity. Body, pretty self-explanatory. It's for anything that requires strength, like wrestling, any type of strength feats, physical endurance, such as resisting disease or fatigue, things like that. Speed, this represents how fast your character moves. And just like the cyberpunk system, where you have basically movement based on what your character's speed is, and that's how many movement points you have or how far you can go on a turn. You want to take the other ones?
Sure. So we left off on speed. So we have empathy, and this would be your charisma stat. Anything that is regarding your heart or emotions, seducing, persuading, kind of fall under that. So yeah, that would be your charisma, 1 for 1. You have craft, as Greg said earlier, and that is, like I was mentioning earlier, there is number one, there is a crafting class, but it's on the class episode, but also, characters, from all walks of life can, put points into crafting if they want to be able to craft themselves, um,
There's
weapons, armor, stuff like that.
there's one key piece that I really like in there, and I think there's a certain segment of people that would really like this, and it's that last line, also for using artillery.
And setting traps. Yep.
I
So yeah. So if you want to
don't care
like
about setting
kind of,
traps, but artillery, yeah,
so I
let's
want to
go.
use I want to use some artillery. Yep. So will is things for like intimidation, your magical checks and mental endurance checks. Um, it shows your sheer power at keeping forward and your ability to control magic. So that is, yeah. So will, like we were saying earlier, is more of that ability that's going to be for your kind of spell casting, um, and ritual casting classes. There are a few of them. Then luck. Luck is basically a stat that is pure. To represent pure chance. It's a pool of points used to change things in your. Basically, before you make a skill roll, you can add some points from your luck pool to kind of skew that in your favor. And that again is in game is kind of represent, the pure chaotic chance of things happening. Um, and then there are various tables to kind of help you adjust how you're going to allocate those. And I
Also be
guess we'll
used as
jump in.
also can be used in a death save to save your character.
Yes.
So
Yep. Which that is actually a break from the usual, because I don't think you could use luck in, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. Red for death saves. I could be wrong. I don't think so. I think it's just your body.
it's been so long since I've had to address that. I think you are correct. I don't think that is an option in Cyberpunk. I don't think it was an option in any of the Cyberpunk games to
Huh.
use luck to
So,
try and save your character when it comes to a death save. But
huh. Which is a change. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good or bad change, but as I'm reading this, I kind of notice. Oh, okay, that. Yeah. And then there are some more
it's
stats.
a good
Well,
change.
go ahead.
It's a good
Yeah, good
change.
change. No, I honestly, I think it again, it leads into that kind of, you got lucky this time kind of deal. That could happen with that thing. Then you
Right?
have the Rive stats. Um, and this is vigor is going to be based off of particular professions. And this is also another stat that ties into magic usage. But basically, your vigor score is how many points of chaos you can channel at one time without damaging yourself. And again, that harkens back to this game's magic system coming with a cost. It's not just
Right.
spending a spell slot, or a cantrip or whatever. No, there's a cost to weaving magic. Nothing's free out in these streets. You got to pay for everything, which I appreciate. Um, so stun is basically, your stun score represents how hard it is to stun you, which is game mechanic, a combat mechanic. Um, so think of him like think of it like a Constitution shave in D&D. Constitution saving throw.
Absolutely.
You got
So
run. Go ahead. Sorry, go
what?
ahead.
Yeah, I'll take these. So
Okay.
run
Yeah.
is literally your speed times 3. I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you decide to run, you're going to run whatever your speed is times 3, and that's considered moving fast. Um, and that's all in one turn. So you can choose to use that statistic, and that takes your turn essentially to run. And you think about it, that's pretty. Most of them are like if it's a speed based thing or movement based thing, it's usually a run as your movement times two. So that's something a little different for this game, that it's your speed times three or your movement times three. And then leap, which you don't usually see that. You know, normally there's a breakdown, or you see just you know, a jump over a certain amount of feet is going to, you know, require this for a acrobatics roll or an athletics roll or something like that. Here you actually have a skill for it. So your leap score is how many meters you can jump from from a running start. Leap also establishes how far you can move when you're climbing. So two really good mechanics based on that that are not typically well developed in a lot of other games. So I
Yes.
definitely like that. And we have a few more down here at the bottom. I'm going to go back over to you, Rob, if you want to start out with those.
Yeah, sure. I'll do a couple of them. So hit points, self-explanatory. Hit points is it's kind of your health. It's number of it's basically the number of points of damage you can take before you go into a death state and start bleeding out. And then you'll have to start doing saving throws to not die. Now stamina is basically represents how much energy you can expend where you become exhausted. Now, yep, there's kind of exhaustion in this game as well. It's handled a little, but it and here's the thing: this stamina applies to both physical effort or the use of magic. Um, and kind of how hard it also kind of pertains to how hard it is to knock you out. When it runs out, you're stunned and can't do anything but recover. Um, which, hey, that happens. But you can do certain aspects, certain things and skills and abilities that you can do even while exhausted or while your stamina is fully depleted, and that'll be based on character classes. Now encumbrance, which see, whenever I read encumbrance in any system, I know that's a hot button topic with a lot of people. Most, especially, I'm going to go back to D&D. A lot of people don't like keeping track of how much they're carrying. They just like to hand wave it. I, for one, I
Why can't I
prefer
put my
that.
full plate in my backpack?
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much it. And here's the funny thing is D&D has made efforts to really get rid of that aspect. Mechanic like rules as written wise. I mean, you got bags of holding and all that jazz. But anyway, so here encumbrance will be your body times 10. This is how much weight you can carry without being slowed down. When you are encumbered, you basically kind of take one. You start subtracting from your stats, which start affecting your ability to do this. Which again I like because it adds, excuse me, it adds that to that immersion for me anyway. I'm sure there are folks who kind of don't pay attention to the encumbrance in this game.
Well, and
Um,
it's simplified quite a bit because
it
you
is,
know,
yeah.
you don't have all those weight things going on like you do with some games where you have a little bit of weight with this and a little bit of weight with that, and you got to keep track of how much all this stuff weighs and all that garbage.
Yep.
Go ahead, man.
Then we got so recovery. This is going to be it's going to indicate how many hit points you get back each day of bed rest. So when you do finally kind of get hit, because you're gonna get hit, and that's one thing I do want to stress. We're probably going to talk more about this as we do character creation and combat later on. Um, Combat in this game is deadly. Like you're gonna get fucked up, which I for one appreciate. But yeah, recovery is basically how much health you're gonna get back with some bed rest, and you can either do first aid or a healing hands check on you. That's discussed later. Now, last but not least, just because you don't have a weapon in hand doesn't mean you are without the ability to defend yourself. You can throw hands in this game. You can punch and kick, and that will be basically it's going to be based off. It's going to how much damage you can do with a punch or a kick, and it does state that these attacks are non-lethal, so you can't kill someone realistically. Obviously, you can kind of flavor that in a session with DM. And there is a chart to determine how much damage you're going to. either a punch or a kick, and it's going to be based off of your body score. The higher your body, the more damage you'll be able to do with your hands and feet.
Yeah, the old saying, man, too much of anything can kill you.
Yep, exactly.
So to correspond with all of these skills and like the things that Rob was just talking about with the punch and kick, the game itself has quite a few tables that allow you, quick reference to be able to really see how things work quickly. A lot
Yes.
of like your physical tables, your hand-to-hand tables, the melee damage piece. There's actually a bonus system. You could say a bonus or negative system, depending on how strong your character is. I mean, you
Hmm.
you may actually do lower damage for a weaker or smaller character, or higher damage if you have a much higher body score.
Pretty much. And again, that is a good thing that you bring up, Greg, is the charts, and that's something that based off kind of how we're what we're talking about, you can kind of think, oh, I'm gonna get overwhelmed with all these numbers. They thought about that. Again, hats off to Martel Sorian. They made sure that while there's a lot of information on the page, these charts really make it easy to, at a glance, figure it out pretty quickly. Um, and then
One,
we have all the skills
Yeah,
attached
we,
to each of those.
we can cover those. We can cover those next week with the character
Yeah.
creation because we'll have to go through a lot of them anyway.
Yep.
Um, and every one of the skills has a full description in here, and they're actually very well designed. So that was something I found very refreshing because a lot of times you can be going through skills or different traits or things like that for classes, and you find inconsistencies, things that don't mesh well with other things, or skills that maybe don't, they give you some details, but then there's a point where it just kind of cuts off and there's nothing. You're just left, well, what happens after that?
Yep.
This actually does a fairly good job fully fleshing out those skills and makes it so the system works pretty well together with multiple different classes and things like that. One thing I really want to highlight in here is um, just like the cyberpunk books, there's a lot of sideline stuff in here, small tidbits of conversation and pieces about the game that are not in the main body of the text, but kind of as like side notes, essentially, that give you, if you run into something that you're like, hey, that's a little bit confusing, I encourage you to look at the side of the page and read through the side notes that are over there, because it's probably they probably realize that, hey, maybe that's a little bit confusing, so we'll write this over here to clear it up for you.
Yep. There's an answer. There's definitely an answer for you. If somewhere on the page, they did a really good job of making sure that it's easy to parse the information, both for the DM and for the players. All right. So we're going over skills next week. What else do you want to touch on this episode?
Let's see, because I mean, we could. Mm, Actually, I mean, we could go through the skills resolution piece because that is a mechanics item. So
Yeah, let's do that.
we talk
Let's
about
rock
how
with
that's
that one.
going to work. And
Yeah. All right. Skills resolution. Where I was just there.
page 57.
There we go.
All right. So the system itself is designed to work separately when it comes to environmental or the monsters, the NPCs versus, and actually I would say NPCs, and then there's direct antagonists, and then there's like PvP, player on player.
Hmm.
The PvP and the direct antagonists are basically the same. There are a little bit of difference because you are going to be rolling against each other, using like a DC value for it. Um,
Yep.
But opposing versus antagonist, it's a really straightforward thing. Now, your DM could use a set roll for or a set number for you to roll against, like a target value, basically a difficulty value. You're essentially going to roll a d10, add your skill level to it, and the appropriate stat. And there you go. That's how you're going to roll against that. I definitely would encourage DMs to set like minimum values depending on what is going on, so that you're not, ideally you as a GM are not doing a lot of rolling, because the more rolling you do, you're basically just stealing time from your players. That's my opinion, but I mean, if you're rolling a lot, then they have to sit there and watch you roll, and that's just not, it's not conducive to a fun game. You know what I mean? And
Well,
especially if you
not
have a
only that,
large party. I mean, go ahead.
not only that, it's just more work for you as a DM.
Right.
That's it. And trust me, you already have enough work for you. um, one other thing that is also a carryover from Red, well, from all of the Cyberpunk games actually, is the fact that you roll, can make a skill check even if you have no points in the skill. Now that's not going to say that's not unique to Artas or in games. It was the first place that I saw it at.
Yeah.
Just my experience. But yeah, you can always make a skill check even if you don't have the points in it. Is you'll just roll the base D10 die, um, and I believe add your stat to that. That's it. What else? What else with skill
I
resolution?
honestly, I think that was kind of, I think that just developed over time. The idea of if you don't have a skill, you don't have points in a skill, means you can't do it.
Mm.
Um, I don't, I don't, and maybe I'm completely wrong. And if somebody finds it out there, please tell me. But I don't remember any system specifically saying that if you don't have points in a skill, means you can't do it.
True.
Now, there are some particular skills that are created specifically for a class or something like that. That's different, because that's like being a doctor. I mean, you don't want me to do your operation. You know what I mean? If you need one, or maybe you do. I'm not I'm not going to be
He's
held
telling you
accountable
now.
for what happens. But
Yep.
yeah, never know. I might get lucky.
Well, you might roll a nat 20 there.
But yeah, so I just, that's a bad idea of going with that idea, the idea that if you don't have any skill in something means you just can't do it. And it's like, okay, you know, it doesn't mean that you're going to be good at it, but
Yep.
any idiot can jump behind the wheel in a car, even a blind person.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean they're going to be able to actually go far, but I mean, they could jump
They can
in
do it.
and do it. Yeah,
They can do it. Doesn't mean they're going to succeed. They can
right.
try. Um, yeah.
Well,
I do like that. I wanted to point that out for anyone who might have been curious as to whether that was still a thing. What else? What else? Yes, a lot of these things we'll kind of be going over as we put characters together next episode.
so there's also an idea of second tries in this game. So you can continue to try a task with the permission of your game master, but you can continue to try a task over and over again if you want to. Now, the more you do that, the more likely something bad is going to happen if you continuously fail at trying to do whatever it is that you want to do. But just because you have, you use your one action and you try to talk the guard into letting you pass, it doesn't mean that the conversation ends there. You could continue to try to talk that guard into letting you pass. Um, and it's kind of a fuck around and find out kind of situation. You just keep pushing on that sore spot until they either back off and say, "All right, go," or you get a gauntlet in the face. All right.
All right. There is one thing that I was thinking maybe we could touch on or not, because it has to do with combat, but a particular type of combat that I have not seen in any other system yet. Verbal combat.
Yes. There's kind of a form of that in there is kind of a form of that in Cyberpunk, only it's based on your reputation. So it's
Yeah.
not exactly the same. This is more fleshed out than that is. Go ahead, man. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, let's dive into it because that's an interesting one for me. And the system that Greg that was he was just talking about is also in this system as well. Like your character can gain a reputation for bad, and there's just charts and stuff for that. Just one chart, but this is actually a fleshed out verbal combat system that is again I've not seen it in any other system, so I think it's interesting.
I've still got one
Basically,
good leg.
yep, they pretty much. So verbal combat is basically when you're running a more kind of diplomatic game, you have a lot of bards and merchants and stuff like that. You may want to use a more verbal combat system, which grants persuasion and other verbal skills their own combat. Basically, let's see, each player then determines their resolve, which acts as their health points. And your resolve is going to be will plus your int divided by 2 times your times 5. Um, there's a way to break it down that the book shows you, so it doesn't get too overly complicated. But basically, what it kind of boils down to is verbal attacks are going to be split up between empathetic and antagonistic. Empathetic attacks aim to endear your target to you. They offer more options but tend to be weaker and entirely reliant on empathy stat. Antagonistic attacks, on the other hand, are more often powerful and benefit from torture and torment. So yeah, you can get kind of dark. Um, and that the catch is that the antagonistic attacks are more likely to win combat and ensure that your target avoids you or acts as your enemy in the future. Kind of circling back to that reputation. So you can gain a reputation for good or ill, depending on kind of what you do. Um, and yeah, it's kind of all fleshed out. There'll be damage numbers and effects and things like that. Um, and there's defenses. I mean, simple. You can simply ignore something in this game, and it kind of tells you aesthetic tools, things like romance, study, meaning you can kind of study someone and kind of human perception, seeing how they react to certain things. Um, can bribe and bully. It's really interesting. But I just wanted to touch on that because oftentimes in systems or classes that aren't not necessarily combat focused, like your merchants or crafters, things like that, they kind of they suck at combat. And when they get into when you get invariably get into a fight, there's really not much for them to do, which here kind of offers you as a more persuasive and manipulative character options to assist even before the first punch or is thrown or the first blade is drawn. You kind of start that process, which I think is really and it gives something for those characters and players who are more kind of lean towards that way to kind of talk things out or insult people so bad that they have a midlife crisis. um but yeah.
I,
What
I
else?
think the last really big piece in here we've already kind of touched a little bit on with the crafting system, and that really comes down to the economic side of this and the
Yep.
gear and equipment, because this system has I'm going to say a very expanded section on gear and equipment, which includes everything from different types of weapons and armor to common items to crafting ingredients to travel modes, services, all kinds of stuff, which is pretty cool
Thank you,
because
Jesus.
Usually you only see like a couple pages, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, 2, 3 pages of this, and all right, let's move on from that. Um,
Mm.
and this has a very expansive, it's very well laid out and very detailed. Not that it's going to cover everything in the world, but it does give you, a pretty large variety of things to look at when it comes to weapons, when it comes to armor, when it comes to your more mundane supplies, your common items. There's a services section, and then the crafting piece to it, and ingredients,
Yep.
predominantly centering around alchemy, but I mean
Yes.
it's pretty expansive. So
And that's one of the things that I like that they put in here. And again, each table is going to be different, and you you'll find specialized items. But I feel the crafting piece is this game's version of your magical item, specialized items, whereas the gear section will offer you a lot of items that you can build off of, kind of crafting and recrafting those into better items. Um, and it's not just human items; they do have a section for elder race items. So
they do.
elvish items, dwarven items, and things like that. So not just the humans that get stuff. But yeah, I agree with you, Greg. I like the fact that they've given what you would expect from the gear and items section of the TTRPG, but they've definitely added more depth to it, in conjunction with the crafting piece.
The last thing to mechanics we've kind of touched on it several times now, but that is magic, and literally magic in this system is chaos,
Mm.
literally. Um, did you want to talk about it a little bit? Because there are
Sure, we
several
can dive
different
into it.
types of magic, but just
I
remember,
love it.
magic is chaos.
It comes
Go
with the
for it.
cost. Let's go down to magic. Hold on, gotta scroll down a little. Magic Revolution. Nope, nope. Where is it?
Primal
I gotta
chaos,
scroll.
page 100.
100. Okay, yeah, I scrolled a little too far. There we go. That's literally the first thing. The dangers of magic. Oh boy, that's funny. So yeah, so magic basically, while sources most dangerous, sources are the most dangerous of mages. All forms of magic carry a risk. Fundamentals of casting spells, rituals, and the like require a mage to not only draw energy from another realm, again adding to the lore piece of the conjunction, but use their own body as a conduit for the spell. Which again, that's really cool because most systems that I've seen, especially to date, use a foci. Nah, here you are the focus. You're the battery. So you better watch the voltages. Um, let's see. Uh, Mages who draw on too much magic through their body suffer excruciating pain and often side effects. Magic bleed outs from them. Vigor, and this is kind of a side note here. Vigor is an intangible measurement how much uh, chaos you can channel through your body at any one time. Exceeding that amount has disastrous effects. Um, let's see.
If we go,
Uh,
let's just take a look. Well, okay, because there's several different types of magic. If you wanted to kind of talk
yep,
through those a little bit.
yep. So you have, and for those of you who play the game, you'll know there's kind of different elemental magics. There's earth, air, water, um, fire. So the four elements, and then you can mix kind of those elements for different spell effects there. So mix elements. Some spells listed here are impossible without the unification of at least two elements. These spells are called mixed element, meaning that they'll draw on power from kind of multiple different elements and probably have more disastrous effects. Um, let's see. You have everything from like blinding dust to earth spikes to that's for earth. You have what would amount to fireballs. You know, brandings, flames. Let's see, area of effects. When using an area of effect spell such as like a static storm, you should always keep in mind that these spells affect other player characters and friendly NPCs as well as enemies. It would be a shame to cast static storm in a desperate situation and actually wound your party. And that is something that is not unique to Witcher by any means, but they definitely don't shy away from the friendly fire.
No, they don't.
Let's see what else we've
Well,
got here.
you've got rituals, you've got hexes, you
Yep.
have a unique thing called places of power when it comes to magic. Um, and there's mechanics behind all of those things and how they can be used. Um, and they are just exactly what they sound like, but each one of them carries side effects. I guess you could potential side effects.
Yep.
Um,
And that's just for the mages, because again, there are different types of healing. You have priest invocations, so it's a different type of magic. Like they have druidic invocations, preacher invocations, archpriest invocations, and these are things that are not tied necessarily to the elements, but to religion and to gods. Which there is a focus on religion. There's a section on that here in the different faiths within the Witcher universe. Um, so yeah, there you get a lot of variety, and all of these have different effects and different consequences.
yep.
And then we come to what everyone loves, the Witcher signs. So Witchers also, as anyone who knows the universe will know that Witchers can use magic on a basic level when compared to like priests and druids and mages. And these are based on signs, and the reason for that is because Witchers are have to use these in combat, quick, deadly, and they have to be very readily available. So hand signs, usually both or one, are kind of what you'll be able to use should you decide to play a Witcher character class. And as Greg said, there are rituals that you can perform. Some of them forbidden.
Amar.
Uh, no, so for all you blood magic people out there, spirit possession is another thing that can happen to your character. So beware of that. And what else? Hexes. That's another form of magic. Which I mean, as the name implies, you can curse someone, and it can be a problem. And here's the thing: it's not just well you curse them and it's for a particular duration. You know, you actually have to like lifting hexes is kind of is easier. There are also curses that you can put on people, but they're kind of formulaic, and discovering the method on how to lift hex or a curse can be as difficult or as easy as a DM wants. So it'll basically require you to do something as a character, as a player character, or as a group to help person been hexed or cursed. So it's not just I'll just wait it out. I'll go on a short rest or long rest, sleep it off. That'll be good in the morning. Nah, you're gonna have to work for this one. Um, which I honestly find kind of cool because it gives that style of magic a little. Last but not least,
Well,
learning magic. Oh, go ahead. Oh,
I,
sorry. Go
I
ahead,
I
Greg.
think at that point, I think we can jump down and just talk a little bit more about the direct combat piece to it, because there are some specifics in there. Um,
Yep.
right there, again, the crafting system is massive in this game. There is so much detail, and it is such an easy crafting system to use. Well set up, and it just makes sense. We'll put it that way.
Mm.
Um, but if you jump down to like page 149, 150, it really starts to talk about combat in the system and how it works. Combat in The Witcher. I love the very first section in there. Don't fight groups. Very, very, very smart.
Yep.
So engaging in one-on-one combat, fantastic. Go for it. If you think you're going to be, John Wick taking on 20 guys, yeah, probably not.
You're probably gonna die pretty quickly. Um, or if you survive, you're gonna be maimed, pretty severely. So keep that in mind, guys.
Yeah, definitely fight as a team when when you can, and don't try to take on the big groups because it's not going to go well for you. Um, other little things to really look at. There are definitely critical wounds in the game. There's critical success, critical failure, and you definitely want to make sure that you're using things to your advantage. So look for exploits in every adventure. What can it be? Terrain? Can it be just be creative? When it comes to what you want to do with your character, and use the things around you, and make sure you identify that to your GM and tell them, hey, I want to use the trees or whatever, the fog. I want to use the fog to my advantage to add to my stealth or whatever it happens to be. I would say definitely call that out because I mean the GM's not going to remember everything all the time. I mean,
Yep. And just to kind of give you a basic overview, and again, we're gonna go to this in next week's episode. But with regards to combat, obviously, kind of like other TTRPGs, everything happens in rounds. There's initiative rolls, there's actions, and give you a quick breakdown. You have attack. You have your typical attack. You can initiate verbal combat, which we talked about earlier. Cast magic. You can kind of use a skill or pick up or draw an item or weapon. And typically, a full round will be a movement, an action, a defense. There are defensive actions that you can take to avoid damage, um, and other things like that.
and if
And
you're
then
if you
there's
if you're going to fight an actual monster, silver is your friend.
yes, yes, it is because we'll be talking as we'll be creating characters. We'll kind of be talking more of like, hey, well, this is how this works and all that jazz. But the character, and again, for the works and things to really streamline it for you, so you can kind of pick up and go.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's aspects to the combat, like okay, your actions. We haven't really clearly defined that. We keep saying you take your action, but the reality behind the action system is you choose. You can either
mhm.
have two fast strikes, or what are called fast strikes, or you can have one strong strike. Um, I believe that's how that. Am I saying that wrong?
No, you are correct.
Yeah, two fast
Yep,
strikes or one strong strike.
yep.
And obviously, the strong strike is going to do more damage, but it's
It's
you
just
know
one strike. That's it.
right.
Once
Well,
it's one attack.
right, and it actually is the one huge attack, so it comes with some negatives as well. So if you are with a fast attack,
Yep.
anything else in there? Let's see,
I
no layering of armor.
Yeah. I mean that's makes
I
sense.
I remember the good old days when you used to be able to not this game, but there was a point where you could layer some armor.
Oh, and like the early Cyberpunk games.
Yeah, some of the early games allowed you to do that, where you could layer armor.
I mean, here's the thing. In reality, that's exactly what you would do. With kind of a medieval setting.
Just
You had
imagine the guy running around wearing like 5 winter coats in the winter, and your arms are stuck hanging out to the side. I'm
yeah,
I'm
that's it.
fine.
That's the image I get as well. But like in reality, armor, excuse me, in medieval settings, were layered because you had your
Oh
plates,
yeah,
then you had like oiled leather on top and probably like some chainmail, and then under that you had like cloth. So you had layers.
Right.
So like I get like thematically my mind is like, wait, but it makes sense to do that. But then, obviously from the game mechanic, like, no. Then you just have people like you said who just, oh, I'm just gonna put this on and this on and then running around.
You hit my, you got through my AC 18 plate mail, but now I have my AC 15.
And to
What do you?
finish. Yep. So I mean it's again, you gotta have balance. Um, but yeah. So and then there's a cover feature here as well. Again, that is reminiscent of Red or the other Cyberpunk games from my experience. Um, so yeah. And there is range combat as well. We'll go over that next episode. Um,
I think
human human shields.
yeah. Well, those are always fun. Human shields are always fun.
Yep.
And there's definitely, like in Cyberpunk, there's definitely a system for human shields for sure. Um, yeah, all you got to do is win brawling with them, and you now have a human shield until they can break free. All right. So I think that's most of it. There's a lot of the effects pieces for like critical injuries. Well, and you can be creative with it. I mean, you don't have to just roll on these tables. You could create your own tables if you wanted to. But you don't need to. The problem is you'd get a critical hit. What actually happened? So that's where the critical hit tables actually come in handy, is it gives you a quick reference to say, well, yeah, you cut their ear. I think that's it, man. Anybody have any questions? Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with this, Rob?
No, I think that's it. I'm excited to start putting some characters together. Honestly, that's kind of where I'm at. This like I want to get to next week so we start putting some characters together.
What the first the character creation, the lore, the world is like the first 200 and some pages of the book, and to
Yes.
give you an idea of just how much goes into it. So and it's a good. I mean, here's the book, so it's a good sized book. So
Hmm.
lots of material there. All right. I think with that, we'll say thank you very much for joining us this evening. I know the stream has been a little bit choppy tonight. I think the connection's been kind of bad. It's been storming up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it cut out a couple of times as we were going through the stream. And
Guys for tuning in. We always love to have you. We love. I mean, you're part of why we're here doing this. If you haven't already, go ahead and join our Discord. Give us a follow here. Also, if you were looking to pick up on the razzmatazz.com website, but if you are looking to pick up any games that you've from Free League Press that you may have heard from earlier, and check that out. We have pretty much they're all there for you to check out.
and if you want to get yourself a copy of The Witcher, again, like Rob said, we don't carry the Witcher right now, but
But
and with that, I think we're going to. I see Darling Creepshow is doing some mini painting tonight, and she's show her some love if you haven't actually been in her channel before. Thank you very much again for being here, and we'll see you.